And then the Jake Paul Ben Askren fight comes on, and you look at Jake Paul. Jake Paul looks good. He's been training. I can see that there's been some work put in. Ben Askren, if you would have just turned and looked at him, and he had swim shorts and flip flops on, I would have been like, oh, so somebody's uncle's here grilling.
This man's on vacation,
dude. I was just like. I mean, I don't know, because regardless of whether it was rigged or whether
once
he
the weigh-in came in,
once
the weigh-in came in and you saw Ben Askren's body, and he, this is not what I said, but someone said he's built like E.T. Like, you knew this fight was over.
Yeah, and again, not to denigrate him, but he's also not like a normal person. Like, he's a professional athlete. So that stuff really matters for him.
Also, he's also an Olympic athlete.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what I expected, but I just assumed he would give a shit. But you could tell from his whole mentality leading up to that fight, he's a very chill dude, doesn't really give a shit. I'm sure at some point he had a lot of fire burning for the career, but I don't know if it was rigged or if it wasn't or whatever the case was, but one thing is very clear, and he did not give a single fuck about being in that ring. He did not give one shit about that.
And it showed, and that's why I won't say the fight was rigged, because Jake took it completely serious.
Yeah.
And Ben got knocked out, but I feel like he just took that hit and just said, "All right, I got my bag."
Yeah,
because walking out of that ring, he was smiling, joking on camera, like with the walk off, and I'm like, "This nigga just got knocked out for over like what 1 point? I forgot the views. It was like 1.4 million pay-per-view buys or some shit, and that's not even including the niggas that got it for free." Such as myself, you can arrest me or whatever, but like I wasn't going to pay for that fight. But so many people watched that or that show or whatever, that boxing match, and he's just walking off just about his day, like not shit happened. And everybody would be like, "Oh, that's rigged," but I think he just didn't care enough to sit and fight. To win his bag.
Yeah, the ref stoppage was a little weird too. And granted, before we get into this, I don't know that much about reffing for boxing, but I'll say he stood up. He looked a little wobbly, but you get the glove shake to make sure that you're still like mentally there. And again, I'm not an expert, but my thing is, if I'm the ref, he's a little wobbly, but he's still there. I just let him go again. If he gets knocked down again in the next 10 seconds, then just call it off. But in my mind, like, especially in a boxing ring, like, people get really hurt in boxing when they get punched in the head a lot. Like, the reason the UFC is safer is because, like,
it's close range.
Well, it's one of those things, like, you're not going for 15 rounds of getting punched in the head. You're going for five rounds or three rounds. To 5, yeah. And so, it's just less trauma on the head. You can get choked out, which, depending on how you're choking somebody out, is relatively safe. But, like, Ben Askren is not going to get exponentially more fucked up than he was at that point if that fight ends in the same round. So, in my mind, I'm just thinking, like, you just let him stand up, and if he gets knocked down again, then you can waive it. Because then, okay, clear. He's not
from the first knockdown, he wasn't out cold, and he got up, and everything was fine. But they said they should have called the Nate Robinson fight. Like, as soon as he got, because that nigga got knocked down like what 3 times before he actually got the knockout. And they should have called that. They said, but so I guess they took the
that fight shouldn't have happened regardless. Like, I mean, and that's the whole problem is that, like, Jake Paul cannot just fight athletes. Like, dude, anybody that has any amount of training in fighting going against anybody who doesn't have training in fighting is going to get their ass beat. Like, full stop. Doesn't matter how athletic you are.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, someone who's like Jake Paul, who's taken this shit by the reins and just has gone head first with how dedicated he is, you need someone who's doing the same shit. And it's just, it's like you can't just pick a random person, which I get. This is why he needed this fight. I completely believe he needed this fight for the win, to be seen as a boxer, because no one's gonna see him as a boxer.
But my point, but what's the next fight? Is my question. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
that I have no idea.
Who demands a big enough draw? Who is still not really a fighter that he has a decent chance against? Because you put Conor McGregor in the ring with Jake Paul, and I mean, again, Conor's going to be down probably 40 pounds at least. Maybe it'll be interesting, and Conor
but
wins
even
that.
the
But
height,
it's like,
bro,
yeah.
Connor's like what, 5'2"?
No, he's five. I think he's like 5'9". So he's losing
Bullshit.
4 inches. He's losing 40 pounds. Like, so, like, I kind of get it, and maybe like Conor starches him or whatever. But I don't know who. Like, you can't put him against anybody that would be in his weight class in the UFC, because he's gonna get absolutely starched. I don't know who he fights that's interesting enough to care about, that would actually be somebody that we think could fight. The only reason that I mean, I still don't know why the only reason Logan Paul's getting in the ring with Floyd Mayweather is because Mayweather isn't going to knock him out. Like, and Floyd Mayweather's like 50. So, like, it's an interesting, like, that's going to be an interesting fight from the perspective of, like, can Logan even touch Floyd Mayweather? But it's not going to be.
That's the big, yeah. It's like catching lightning. So yeah.
But this was the same conversation we had with Conor, and Conor's exponentially better than Logan Paul is, and so he couldn't touch him. So Logan Paul's not going to be able to touch him.
Yeah.
So I like, my point is, like, I guess I just don't know, like, after this Logan Paul Mayweather fight, like, I don't know who's next for anybody, because like, none of it really makes sense to me. Like, unless you pull, like, I don't know, like somebody that's retired, like a former, like, light heavyweight for Jake, like a retired light heavyweight for Jake, or, you know, maybe like an upstart young boxer for Logan, or I don't know. Like, there's really nobody that's interesting enough to me that it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense, you know, to have.
Well, I can tell you right now,
fight.
who would be like a prime candidate for, like, at least fighting Jake? Wellington Boyce.